All right, good morning, everybody. It's Rabbi Kulikowski again. Wanted to discuss an issue that I saw this morning on Twitter, and this is something I've made several videos on this subject, and it's the issue of religious freedom and the attacks on religious freedom in New York State, particularly attacking parochial schools, particularly some of the more cloistered parochial schools in New York State. These are schools where I send my children to, and I'm quite proud that I send my children to these schools because I fully believe that the education that they are getting in these schools is highly superior to the education that they're receiving elsewhere. It's not an issue of what the law says, what do they call it, that it should be substantially similar. I don't remember what exactly the words are in the New York State laws. And now there are new attacks, even though we were promised that these would not be taking place, but now there are new attacks on the parochial schools in New York State. And as someone points out, it's totally inappropriate. Because unlike many other states that we have, that you can get, vouchers and things like that to help pay for, and especially many people in our communities are low income, you can get vouchers to help pay for school choice. New York State refuses. When we ask, well, can you help out, the different things, and then they're insisting that, there has to be new ways of seeing who the teachers are and so forth, and what the curriculums are, but they're not helping us pay for this. They're insisting these things on us, and they're threatening to close down the schools now. Meanwhile, what's going on in the public schools that we're being forced to pay for, that really it's a form of slavery to have to pay for these things. This is what Lincoln was most concerned about when he freed the slaves, is that someone else should be paid for the hard work of one person. One person's hard work should be paying for someone else. And here we have these public schools that are total failures, that are brainwashing kids to be leftists, to be communists. People say, there's no religion in public schools. There is religion in public schools. It's Marxism. Now Dr. Martin Luther King was a great man, and this is not a personal attack on Martin Luther King. But throughout history, great people have been turned into idols. That's why Jacob was so insistent that after he was buried in Egypt, that whenever his children leave, they should get him the heck out of there, because he was afraid that the Egyptians would start worshiping him. And that's why even Moses, we don't know where Moses was buried. Again, our rabbis say that that God was afraid that people would start worshiping Moses. And so too we see this with, and that's not in any way an insult to Jacob or to Moses. It's just showing, it would have been if it was done. And the same thing, other people in history who have been turned into idols, it's not their fault. And today, even when I was in public school, there was this really, it was an idolatrous worship of Martin Luther King, of Martin Luther King who never even existed, not the real Martin Luther King. They forgot a lot of things about who the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King really was, and then turned it into really avodah zarah. And the same thing in Israel. Rabin, who they turned him into some kind of avodah zarah, even worse than what they make out of Dr. King. And and this is not what President Reagan meant when he made Martin Luther King Day. People forget that it was President Reagan who made Martin Luther King Day. Well, all that put aside, the public schools in New York I mean, you have plenty of kids that we're being forced to pay for their indoctrination, or their babysitting. I don't know what it is. It's not education. I guess you could call it their formal education. And the taxpayers are being forced to pay for this, and yet there's nothing to show for it. You know, we're just funneling these people into the prison system, more or less, and other kinds of systems that we're going to have to pay for. You know, and as much as, you know, the media loves to make a big deal when someone has a tzura of an Erlich Yid, or someone who Taka is an Erlich Yid and was probably framed, winds up in prison, and the media loves to make a circus about that, because look, here's a, and they'll call everybody around, anyone with a beard and pay is the rabbi all of a sudden, you know, and you know, but why is that newsworthy? Because it's a man bites dog, because it never happens. You know, when you want to talk about public school, kids who went to public school winding up in prison, you know, I mean, I work, you know, most prisoners, most inmates are products of the public school system. I mean, they usually dropped out, but whatever, but they're not products of yeshivas that much, you know. Once in a while, here and there, there's an aberration. But that's not normal. Most of these people didn't, and they didn't go to Catholic schools either, and for that matter, they didn't go to madrasas. You know, I believe equally that we should protect the religious rights of Muslims also. You know, and Muslims should be our you know, it's shocking how the left grabbed onto the Muslim population of America. You know, in reality, we should be able to bring the Muslim world to the right in America, to the conservative side in America, because we have much more in common. And this issue of religious freedom is, I think, something that is shared whether you're Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. Or at least if you're Orthodox Jewish, you know. I really don't think most of the people on the left, the Jewish people, really truly care about religious freedom. They care about their interpretation of the separation of church and state, but they don't care about what the Congress really, with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Constitution, the First Amendment to the Constitution, made clear of, that we have really freedom of religion, and that's what the Establishment Clause comes to protect the churches and the synagogues and the mosques from the government, to say that no, we don't have one national church, we don't have the Church of England, we don't have the Chief Rabbinate of Israel. Every different church and synagogue and mosque and temple and ashram and coven and whatever it is, and even the meeting houses of the secular humanists, the Society for what do you call it? The Society for Ethical Values, or Society for Ethical Humanism, whatever. All these different groups, they all have equal footing under the law. You know, doesn't mean that they all have to be equal. Doesn't mean that they all have to have the same things. You know, that's not what it means. But it means that they should have the same opportunities as any other, and there should be no favoritism in opportunity. That doesn't mean that there's no difference in outcome. Sure, there's difference in outcome. So anyway, these attacks, and I say shame on you to anyone who voted Democrat in New York State, because you're part of the problem, and that includes because now Cuomo, who was saying, oh, he's going to protect the yeshivas, we knew he was going to turn on us. And now they're attacking the yeshivas. And these are the attacks on religious freedom that we have, just like they made the bakers in Colorado bake cakes, which is the same as forcing a halal restaurant to serve pork, or a kosher restaurant to serve pork, or to serve basar b'chalav, or to serve chametz on Pesach. You might as well making the Christian bakers make the cake for the same-sex couples. You might as well force a kosher restaurant to serve bacon cheeseburgers on Passover. In a way, it's really worse, because that's a more fundamental concept, a more universal concept, the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, whereas this is a more parochial issue. So we have here these attacks on the yeshivas. So what's the answer? Because I have an answer. My answer is as follows. You can't force a ballet school or karate school to teach math. If there is any legal requirement to provide certain types of education legally, that requirement does not fall on the schools. It falls on the parents. Because legally in New York State you can homeschool your kids. And in addition to homeschooling your kids, you could still send them to karate school or ballet school. And theoretically you could send them to, if you could homeschool your kids and do whatever the curriculum is, and you could send them for 8, 9, 10 hours a day to karate school or a ballet school. These schools are not claiming, they're not offering any false advertising. The very frum yeshivas, they're not claiming to be offering a regent's diploma. They're, probably most of the yeshivas in New York State do offer a regent's diploma. But if they're not, there's no false advertising here. There are no parents that said, I expected that my children should get a regent's education when I sent them to Chvez, to Krasna. No. I mean, they're getting what they paid for and what they expected. And this is what the parents wanted. And and the Supreme Court has ruled that it's up to the parents to decide in Yoder versus Wisconsin, in the issue with the Amish. It's up to the parents to decide what kind of education they want to give their kids. And the real issue here is it's a slippery slope, because once you open up the doors, the Pandora's box, to let them into the education system, it doesn't stop. We see what's going on in England now. They want to close down the yeshivas because they're not teaching, gay studies phase, and even if they're teaching, they're not teaching evolution. They're not teaching these different things that these particular schools don't want to teach, and it shouldn't be shoved down anybody's throats. This is really proselytizing. This is a violation of the Establishment Clause, because it's establishing the left-wing ideology as the official Church of America, which it's not. For this reason, I've always felt it's appropriate to treat atheism as a religion like every other religion, because this way they should not be treated with any favoritism. That's why I've said time and time again, I believe we should have atheist chaplains, for many reasons. And I think there's a positive aspect in that also, that if you have atheist chaplains who are teaching ethical humanism, whatever, they're teaching some form of ethics and morals, even if it's not based on anything supernatural, and they're teaching these things to, inmates or to soldiers and so forth, who might think, if I don't believe in anything, I can do whatever I want, and then they're like, no, there's still a society, discussing with someone about AA, someone who runs an AA program, and a drug and alcohol treatment program, and part of it is they offer AA, and then people say, well, you're shoving religion down our throat. And I said, no, a higher power could include the society, or I guess in the left-wing view, the government as a higher power, that there's someone who, like this guy said, even if it's your parole officer has more power than you have, and submitting to that, if you're not submitting to God or some other form of a higher power. But again, a major reason why I would support something like this is, like I said, to make it clear that the atheists shouldn't get any preferential treatment over the Presbyterians, or over the Sufis, or over the Tibetan Buddhists. We should have an equal level playing field, and by recognizing atheism as a religious view, it's not an organized religion, although there are some forms of organized religion in atheism, like I mentioned, the Society for Ethical Culture and things like that, which have many of the trappings of going to church, but they'll read some poetry instead of a prayer, or they'll hear some inspiring sermon, and it's not about God. It's not about maybe even the Bible, although it might be. Maybe they might find some wisdom in certain passages in the Bible, but they don't believe it to be, something that which again, from a religious standpoint, that's abhorrent. But it's part of what religious freedom means in America, is that things that you disagree with, just because you disagree with something doesn't mean it's illegal. We can't force everybody by law to be a certain way, and yet that's what they're trying to do with education laws, which are unconstitutional. People are going to say to me, "Oh, you just made a video about the illegal aliens crossing the border, that they have to follow the laws, and how come you're saying that this yeshiva or that yeshiva doesn't have to follow the laws?" And I'm saying, no, they're following the laws. First of all, like I said from the beginning, substantial equivalence. The yeshivas are substantially superior to the secular schools. I mean, how many public schools the kids are coming out knowing 4 or 5 languages? They're lucky if they know 1 or 2 languages. And here, you go to these yeshivas, you do have an English program, so you have English, you have Yiddish, you have Hebrew, you have Aramaic, and throughout the Talmud you're going to have words that are coming from Greek and other sources and other languages and Persian and so forth, ancient Persian languages and things, and are you going to get that in a public school? Of course not. And the Talmud covers everything. It covers history and science and language arts and math. It's all in there, plus the ethics and the morals that they're not being taught in the public schools. So, so all of this being said, here we have. So it's not only substantially equivalent; it's substantially far, far superior. The boredom that any intelligent kid would have in a public school, and the challenge that every intelligent kid has in it can't be compared, and it gives you life skills that you're going to get. It's not. You see the Chazon Ish, he was able to, because he learned Chulin, he was able to give advice, medical advice, because he knew, what, things in the brain and so forth, and he was able to give a brain surgeon advice on how to make brain surgery because he learned chulin and because he learned the hilchos treifas and stuff, and he knew issues with the brain and so forth, so the Rav Gustman Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, who was the Rebbe of two of my rebbeim, he had a bullet, I think, in his head, and he said he didn't want anesthesia because it would take away from his time from learning, and he was able to give advice to the doctor while he was being operated on, and there was some other brain surgery he was awake during a brain surgery, and he was telling, and the doctor asked him, should I do this, should I do that, and he was telling him what to do and learning Gemara while he was doing it. And I understand not everyone's going to be Rav Gustman, and not everyone's going to be the Chazon Ish, not everyone's going to be Satmar Rav, but even people who are involved in other areas of work and so forth, they're gaining more from their religious studies. Here I went to college, and I was getting paid $18 an hour, working for a millionaire, multi-millionaire, who went to Satmar Yeshiva and didn't even have a GED. It's not. These things are min hashamayim type things. And the thing is that I know people who went to Satmar Yeshiva, who went to college and went on to be doctors and lawyers and so forth. It's not a stira. If that's what you really want to do, you have all the tools from the education that you got to go on and get a little bit more education. But the thing is my answer goes back to what I was saying. It's not the job of these yeshivas to teach English if they're not claiming to teach English. The yeshivas that claim to teach English have to teach English. The yeshivas that are not claiming to teach English should be treated no differently than a karate school or a ballet school. You're going to learn, how to daven and how to learn, and that's it. You're going to learn how to learn Gemara, how to learn Chumash, Halacha, and that's what you're going to yeshiva for. You're not going to yeshiva to get English. That's just how it is. So, and if there's any responsibility falls on the parents. And I know I taught in yeshivas that offered an English program, that offered a Regents program, and the parents on their own over the summer made sure that their sons finished all the Regents tests so they didn't have to take it. So there's nothing to stop. If there's a mama in Satmar who's upset about the English, to teach your son at home. And the thing is, who told you to send your kids to Satmar? I know plenty of people who grew up in Satmar and switched to Baba or Vishnitz or Wien, or even they're still Satmar Chassidim and they send their kids to Wien, to Spinka, to Krasna, because they want a little bit of better education, maybe even religiously. They want smaller classrooms or something like that, so that and they're able to afford it, so they're willing to pay for it. Even though I'm making more money than I ever did, I still really can't afford much more than the Satmar schools, and they really don't have any other places to go. But for a while, my kids were being homeschooled, and my plan is, to do like this mother who I said to. I'm sending my kids to Satmar because that's the Jewish education I want them to get. And at home, we can handle English. We can when they're old enough to take Regents tests, we can get them started with the Regents tests on their own, and they can do that on their own. If they want to go to college or whatever. I know most of their peers are not going to want to, but some of them they might want. That's what they might want to do, and that's their business, and it's up to them, But I want to give my kids something that I was deprived of. as bad as the public schools were when I was a kid, and I went to very good public schools, and they were still awful, I went to probably some of the best public schools, and they were horrible. And they're much worse today because of all the left-wing nonsense that's being shoved down their throats, and the proselytization that's going on to force people to abandon Judeo-Christian values and to embrace Marxism. So, and we really need to stand up to this nonsense, because there's no future for America if this is the kind of garbage they're teaching in the schools. And so I object when I hear, Askanim who say, we're not against public schools, just not for us. No, these public schools are garbage, and they have a chutzpah to tell us that we have to shape up when they're in such bad shape. Oh, look at beautiful snow on the trees. It's really beautiful. So anyway, thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe. Comment. All the best. Take care.